Hello and welcome to week 4 of a video series on teaching science through the COVID-19 crisis. I'm Riley DeVito, the Idaho State Department of Education science coach, and this week we're going to be talking about phenomenon and place-based learning. A few weeks ago I talked about phenomenon, but I feel like it has a real place with this digital learning, and I wanted to focus on it more today as well as discuss some place-based learning since students are truly learning where they're at. Not just cognitively, but now also physically. So as we move through the resources today, I want you to think about where you're at right now. Idaho is such a beautiful place to live, whether you have access to the Boise foothills, the Sawtooth, or the Snake River Plain. We have some of the most unique geology right outside of our doors. And I want you to think about what your students could step outside into and experience. So these lessons are about an opportunity for students to explore the great state that we live in and really connect with science where they are at. Some of you may already be familiar with phenomenon, but I want to provide some background as a refresher or as an introduction. This quote is from The Wonder of Science, which is one of the resources that we'll be exploring a little bit more in depth today. A phenomenon is simply an observable event. In the science classroom, a carefully chosen phenomenon can drive student inquiry. Phenomena add relevance to the science classroom, showing students science in their own world. A good phenomenon is observable, interesting, complex, and aligned to the appropriate standard. Note that phenomenon is an observable event. It's important to distinguish between phenomenon and disciplinary content. So for example, the disciplinary content would be that trees photosynthesize. The phenomenon would be that a huge tree can grow from a small seed. I've included a picture to the right as an example of this. That plant started out as a small seed and will eventually grow into a much, much larger plant than the original seed. That's something that is observable, it's interesting, there's a lot of things going on, it's very complex, and it's aligned to several K-12 standards. I also think the picture captures the idea of plants and seeds in terms of curiosity, that as teachers we're planting the seeds of curiosity by introducing our students to phenomenon, and hopefully we can reap the benefits of that as students grow into observant scientists. So here are a few examples of phenomenon that I want to show you today. The first is a high school physical science standard. I want to show you the phenomenon first and then walk you through how I would have addressed this with my students. So this is steel wool that is on fire, and this is actually about halfway through the video of lighting it on fire and then it's burning. And as you can see that the mass on the scale is actually increasing, which definitely makes students scratch their head and wonder what is going on. I would likely use this by first asking my students a series of questions, such as what happens to the mass when something is burned, or when wood burns, it gets smaller, so where does that mass go? Where does the burning wood go? This leads students to develop hypotheses about combustion and the processes of burning. Typically, students will say that things lose mass when they are burned, or that the burning wood goes away as smoke, or it turns into coal. So after entertaining that discussion, I would show them this video, show them this phenomenon. As the mass is increasing, I would point that out to students to make sure that they're really picking up on that. I would probably show this video 3 or 4 times and have students write down observations and questions that arise as they watch the video. And from there, there's a multitude of standards that we can explore in terms of atoms, combustion, mass, exchange of mass. Those are all things that we can talk about just based off of this one phenomenon. And it all starts with that curiosity. I also have this phenomenon about a white blood cell chasing a bacteria, which is pretty cool. I would probably preface this one by asking students if cells can think and how does your body keep you healthy. We'd probably watch this a couple of times and students again would generate those wondering type questions. And that would be a good jumping off point to talk about cell differentiation, signal pathways, or disease, depending on what direction that you wanted to take it. So I got both of these phenomenon from a website called The Wonder of Science, and it's just thewonderofscience.com. It's easy to Google. And if you click right here on this phenomenon tab, it will take you to a list of K-12 or K-5 in the middle school, high school, and then it breaks it out for life science or science, physical science for both middle school and high school. So if you click on one of these, so for example, middle school life science, it will actually break out into each of the standards, which makes it really, really easy and convenient for you as the teacher, where you don't have to go hunt down a phenomenon that fits your particular standard. It's all just presented right here for you. So for example, we can click on photosynthesis, since I mentioned that earlier with trees, and it will give you a host of potential phenomena that you can use. Some of these are videos, some of them are links to articles that you might consider, but they're all fantastic. So for example, we can look on why do sunflowers follow the sun? And there's a video that students can watch there that will serve as that phenomenon. And then the web resource that this is taken from is found right here. So you can, as a teacher, click on that for more information and potentially distribute that as you feel necessary. I've talked about phenomenon for NGSS a little bit in the past, and I just want to bring it up again. Phenomenon for NGSS is short video clips or pictures that really address phenomenon. And I mean, I love all of these phenomena on here, but I have to say that I do like Wonder of Science a little better because it's more organized by those standards. But this is still a great resource for you to use in terms of all kinds of crazy phenomenon that students can be exposed to. So phenomenon don't just have to be those videos or pictures. Phenomenon can also be data. Data has some really funky things that happen, some really interesting things can happen with data. Presenting students with a graph is a great way to expose them to that excitement and get their curiosity flowing. So for example, in this graph, why is it hotter in the summer? And is temperature related to precipitation, or are those mutually exclusive? And are there places in the world where this graph might actually be inverted? Or really a basic question might just be, where is this graph from? Why does it look like that in this place? Another way that you might use phenomenon is by including your own personal aspect into their inquiry. So this is a picture from my most recent trip to the Redwood Forest, which I am really hoping I get to go back to soon. But this really allows you to build a connection with your students by providing them some real world connection and a connection with you as a person. It exposes them to what's out there beyond just Idaho or just the United States for that matter. And it really shows students that there's curiosity all around us. So for this particular question, students could ask about how water gets all the way to the top of these redwoods, which are huge, tall trees. And then in this particular tree, why the middle is burnt out, but not the outside, and whether the tree is alive or not. And if it is alive, how is it still alive, even though the entire middle of the tree has been burned out? So that's just a couple of different ways that you can bring phenomenon into teaching. Another way that you may bring phenomenon into teaching is by using some digital labs. And I'm specifically focusing on virtual and digital labs right now and simulations because we're in this online teaching format. These are a great way to continue accessing that phenomenon, but I would caution to make sure that when you're choosing one of the labs or simulations, that you're remembering that the phenomenon is an observable event and not just pure content. So make sure you're erring on that side of something interesting is happening in the world around them. Let's take a look at first PhET, which is fantastic. I use these all the time in class. I get so excited when I show people these. If you scroll down just a little bit here, it shows the different content areas that you can focus on. So I'm going to focus on an earth science one to start with, and it will show you all of these different simulations that students can do. And these are cool because they are simulations, not just videos to watch. An example of that, finding something where it's a phenomenon versus just the content, would be this balloons and static electricity. That's really a phenomenon because that's something that is observable and happens. And you can even see in the thumbnail here that there's balloons in a sweater, which are real world things that students can experience. And we can just look at some of these like the diffusion or gas intro. Those look very conceptual and very lab-based. So these would probably not be your best phenomenon-based, but you could use these in another context in terms of those digital labs. I also want to show you HHMI's BioInteractive. These are pretty neat because there's a lot of interactive. There's also articles, there's videos. It's kind of a conglomerate of information. They are probably best known for their lizard labs, which is also my favorite, happens to be my favorite. If you just type in lizard on the search there, you can see that they have all kinds of things that you could do with that. So we've got lizards in the cold, how lizards find their way home, using DNA with phylogeny, lizards and hurricanes, evolutionary tree, and they do have a virtual lab here if you wanted to do that. This is really easily searchable for any type of resource that you're doing, any type of topic that you're exploring to get those phenomenon in a digital way to your students. Hopefully you're getting the idea that phenomenon is everywhere and that they aren't really difficult to find, that you don't need to have specific tools in order to create phenomenon, that they're really just all around and all over. Hopefully you see that as we start talking about the idea of place-based learning. So switching gears a little bit and talking about place-based learning, hopefully you'll start to see that connection of phenomenon along with the place-based learning. So here's how Getting Smarter describes place-based learning. It is anytime, anywhere learning that leverages the power of place and not just the power of technology, personalized learning. If that quote does not define the new culture of teaching that we found ourselves in, I really don't know what does. In particular, I like that technology doesn't have to be a piece of place-based learning. I'm sure many of you are with me in the fact that technology has been really essential in this transition, but a break is really needed. I know many of my students are looking forward to not learning digitally for quite some time. And place-based learning has so much potential to be an incredible teaching tool. You can see that it's not just about teaching the content. We're also teaching students to build autonomy. We're teaching them to look at the world through ecological, political, and economic and social lenses. It's an interdisciplinary model. It's inquiry-based. It allows students to engage in their communities and appreciate the world around them, which is something that I feel like is really lacking when we have students just in the classroom setting all the time. In our current teaching situation, I also think that place-based learning provides us with an opportunity to utilize a classroom that's right outside of our doors and hopefully teach students that learning doesn't stop when you enter or exit the science classroom. It continues throughout your day-to-day, throughout the world, and it's all around us at all times. So combining the idea of phenomenon and place-based learning is a really great way to accomplish a couple of things. So first of all, if we can use the two together, then we can maximize our time with students and encourage them to become active scientists as they move through their environment. Phenomenon can also address multiple standards at one time, which increases the effectiveness of our teaching. And I've talked about that in the past, that if we can combine multiple standards, we're really being effective. And that definitely holds true with phenomenon and place-based learning. Using these two ideas also engages students in their personal interests and allows them to improve their mental health by getting outside and experiencing Idaho. It's an easy way to get kids engaged with phenomenon and place-based lessons, but it's also a great way for parents to get involved in the education. So families can go on walks together, hikes together. Obviously, if young children are going on walks, they should have an adult with them. Students who are working on farms can now do so not just from that agricultural standpoint, but also from that science-based standpoint. And for students who don't have a lot of reasons or opportunities to explore their communities, this might be a great way to initiate or start some of those connections. And finally, both phenomenon and place-based learning encourage students to experience science that truly happens, not just as it is in a pure lab setting, which is important, but this really mimics that real-world science education. Here's one lesson idea about how you might combine phenomenon and place-based learning. Ask students to go outside, whether it be to a park, on a hike or a walk, or working on the farm. Advise them to just be in that place and put away their devices and phones. Have them go with someone they care about if possible. Then have students find their own phenomenon. Have them look for something they're curious about or they have questions about. Depending on what you're teaching, you might direct this step a little bit more or you might leave it open-ended. While students are in their place and they're observing, they can complete a notice wonder table. And this is just a 2-column table or T-chart in which students write what they notice, so their observations, and what they wonder or just the questions that they have. So for example, for this particular phenomenon here, which I got from the Wonder of Science, again, great resource, students might notice that the ants are carrying a worm, that the worm is much, much, much larger than the ants. They might observe that the ants are forming lines or that some ants don't seem to be participating. Then for the wonder side, they might ask, how big is the worm compared to the ants? And why are they forming lines? Where in the world is this video taking place? And what kind of ants or worms are those? They can just list those questions out and those wonderings and those noticings as much as you want them to or as much as they feel comfortable doing to just really gain access to observing the place that they're in. Another way you might encourage students to process their place and phenomenon is through a question formulation technique from the Right Question Institute. You'll see on the left is the procedure, which you would typically use in the classroom, and on the right is an adapted version for digital learning. This technique starts with students experiencing their phenomenon, which is great because in their place-based learning, they're already there, they're already experiencing that phenomenon. Have students generate as many questions as they can in 4 minutes. Preferably, they would still be in the place when they're generating those questions and not having returned home. Then have them categorize open and closed questions. Open meaning they're open-ended with more complex answers, and closed meaning yes or no type questions. Have them prioritize 3 questions that they really think would help them understand that phenomenon. And then if you're using discussion boards of any kind or any type of online community, you can have students post their questions there and have dialogue between the students through that platform. If you're not having one of those, then I might just suggest skipping this step or having students just create a little board on their own for these 3 questions. And then finally, I would have students reflect using the 3 questions that are presented here or 3 questions that you feel like would be really good in this particular setting or for the phenomenon that you may have selected for the students. Another idea is a writing marathon, and this is really going to incorporate a lot of those ELA aspects. And this is also very interdisciplinary in terms of that ELA and science. So I would ask students to stop at 3 different places along that outdoor adventure that they're having. At each stop, have them write for 10 minutes. Honestly, it's not important what the kids are writing. What's important is that they are writing and they're experiencing that place. It doesn't matter if they're writing fiction, whether it's a to-do list, whether they're writing an autobiography, whatever it might be, just get them writing for a total of 30 minutes, 10 minutes at those 3 different spots. Finally, when they return home, have them reflect on the science element, or they can still do it while they're out in the field. Have them identify a phenomenon or make a list of questions that they thought about during their adventure in relation to science. And I would encourage my students to go back out the following day and see if they can find some answers to those questions that they're generating. Hopefully some of those ideas spark your own curiosity with phenomenon and place-based learning, and you'll try some of those out with your students. As always, if you need help, have questions or concerns, or would like to brainstorm, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can email me at devito.idahosciencecoach@gmail.com. And before wrapping up, I want to remind you to take care of yourself during this time. Make sure that you are getting outside and staying curious about the world around you. If you're healthy, that means that you're healthy for your students and you can inspire their curiosity. All of the links in this presentation are posted here and in the video description as well. This presentation was brought to you by the Idaho State Department of Education.